Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fabulously Candice, Season 3, Episode 8. We have Renee Rosales back to talk about all good things. All good things neurodistinct. So,
Absolutely.
gosh, I talked to you, it was like, what, 2-3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and we just hit it off. And then I sent you somebody because I thought, oh my gosh, this parent.
And we've connected and it's wonderful. So
Good.
yes, thank
Oh
you.
my gosh. Yeah, I was like, people need to know Renee. So let me just give an update, just brag about you again for those that maybe didn't hear the first podcast with Renee. Go back and listen to it though. So as a mother, educator, advocate, and transformational leader, truly, Renee truly is. Renee has set out, to build a better way for the neurodistinct. As an innovator, she is co-founder of 2 of the first virtual schools in Arizona and founder of Theara. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. You've got it
Okay,
perfectly.
good. A business designed to support the neurodistinct from cradle to grace. Ugh. As a visionary, Renee has always sought to make the intangible tangible, creating connections and building bridges in relationships that positively transform all aspects of love. How cool is this? Renee has dedicated her life's work to helping the neurodistinct establish belonging and connection. Every time I read your bio, I'm emotional.
Well, it was emotional in creating this. I think, Theara is just the culmination of everything I've learned and gathered as a neurodistinct person, as the mother of neurodistinct children, married to somebody who's neurodistinct. And we really haven't talked about those issues for many, many years, for generations, in terms of how it expresses itself in our relationships with one another. And it's so exciting that the neurodiversity movement is changing that, because it's empowering so many people all around the world. And I'm so excited to be here with you today, because that's exactly what we talk about, right?
Right. Yeah. And right before we recorded, I said to Tatum, oh my gosh, we've got to record this, because you and I were talking about our ancestors and where we come from, and, just generational, I would say, the gifts that we get from the generations that came before us. So do you mind sharing about your grandfather, what you were
No,
saying?
that's fine. So
Okay.
years ago, actually the year I was born, my grandfather started a counseling center called Emerge. And, it was just a thing in our family. I had no idea that Emerge was an acronym, because I was a little girl when it was all designed. And after I started Theara, and everything I do at Theara, it's an acronym-based system that includes, each acronym has executive functioning and sensory processing strategies and activities included in the acronym. And I developed Emerge ND, which is a class about emerging as neurodiverse and empowering people to embrace their neurodiversity and better manage it. And in that process, after the classes were all completed, I was going through old newspaper clippings that my family had saved, and found an article about my grandfather when he started Emerge. And it was an acronym. I had no idea. And I lined up my acronym for Emerge with his, and they read as a sentence. So,
Oh
I
my
sat there
gosh.
and I was overwhelmed. I started, like, tears were in my eyes, because
Mhm.
I'm like, this is what I was literally born to do. This is what I think our family was intended to do for all of time, really. And it's so interesting and powerful how all of those things happen. And when people are trying to expand the good, and when you carry that forward, it really truly manifests. And we have no idea what's going to manifest in generations to come. So,
Isn't that
yeah.
just so beautiful? That's just so beautiful. I mean, my partner Chris and I are all about it, just honoring our ancestors and, just connecting with our wise and well ancestors and those that came before us, and just really feeling that love and nurturing. And then, like you said, passing it down. And here you weren't even aware of it,
Right.
but
Yeah,
just
I
the
had no idea.
alignment.
And my family members didn't even really No, I mean, they were called when I found the article clipping and they're like, oh yeah, we didn't even mention it to you. And I was like, this is huge. So
It's huge to not be mentioned.
yes,
So
but
shout out
very
to your
exciting.
grandfather. Is it your father's, like your
It's
father?
actually my mother's father.
Okay, so
And my whole family, I mean, that was why it was kind of so crazy to me that I didn't know, because we all spent time investing and working in some capacity at the counseling center all while I was growing up. So
yeah. So just an honoring of your maternal grandfather, right?
yeah,
Really, and how beautiful that you are doing this.
it's
You're
very exciting.
yeah, you're
And it
continuing
was
it.
so empowering to me because I think when we realize, I think I was listening to a podcast a while ago, and it was talking about, I think it was something like over 470 generations that have come before us to get to us and now, and we are called for a profound purpose, and connecting with that I think is huge, and understanding that all of that went into creating us and bringing us here, and
Mhm.
we were born for now, for this time.
Yeah. What we're talking about is so huge. It's so huge. It's so beautiful. I really believe that those of us that are here, we're called to be here on earth at this time. And it's a challenging time,
Mm.
especially in the neurodiversity movement. It is a challenging time. There's a lot of infighting going on right now among,
Yes.
have you noticed that? Like I find I actually have been avoiding social media, doing kind of a social media detox. I think part of that for me is because I hyper focus on it and
Mhm.
I check too much. And then also it pains me. It pains me to see, for those of us that are neurodistinct, it's like we're navigating enough to then have it just fighting inside the movement.
Yes. And I completely relate. In fact, I was developing some content in the last few days,
Mhm.
and I was tackling some of those issues. I think some of the biggest terms we talked about last time are removing some of the negative language that, and it's not that the language has empowered many of us, like using words, the identity or the label of being disabled has equipped many to access the services that they've needed traditionally, like in the education system, in the work environment. And we've needed that. But when all of those words have a negative connotation attached to them, I mean, when
Mhm.
we think about the word disabled, we're not thinking about the abilities the person has. And that's really at the heart of, I think, what many are trying to do with the neurodiversity movement is highlight the strengths and lead people's strengths first rather than according to their lack. But we're not trying to throw out the labels. The labels
Mhm.
are important to acquire the services. And yeah, I read through a lot of the posts, and people going back and forth in that. And
Mhm.
it is difficult not to hyper
Mhm.
focus on, one person's understanding or grasp of it versus another. And so we just have to work to focus on the positive things, and I think really highlight
Mhm.
what good we can bring out of even the disagreements. Like,
Mhm.
what are we really trying to get at? Where do we
Mhm.
truly agree? And I think we truly agree that all neurodistinct people need to be empowered, and we need to be advocating for neuroinclusion in every way we possibly can.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about that too. I agree. 100% disability is not a dirty word. And I took some heat from some folks in the autism community when I posted on LinkedIn and talked about let's ditch the D's. But what I was talking about actually wasn't disability. I was talking about putting autism in the diagnostic manual as a disorder to where
Mhm.
people think it's a mental illness. And what happens when that late we get basically that's attached to us,
Right.
the services we get are not accurate. And so then harm
Correct.
is done. And so, I agree about the word disability in terms of getting the services that folks need. And I also believe that we've got to look at what are our strengths in the school system, in relationships, in the work environment, And it's a difference. Our neurotype has differences, but it's not a deficiency. If I'm comparing myself to my partner who has post-traumatic stress, for instance, that sometimes I do wonder if he has neurodifference, but again, there could
Right.
be, it really can look very similar. So we have to really tease that out. But his brain is different from my brain. And so how can we look at it as a difference together? Our brains are different. It's not that I'm deficient to his brain or I'm not deficient compared to my partner, right?
Right. And there's nothing necessarily wrong, with you. And that was
Yes.
one of the big things that, my husband and I were in a counseling session actually last week, and we were talking, and our therapist had his own breakthrough and was like, at the core of my traumatic triggers, when I'm triggered, at the core of it, underneath all the layers, is this idea that something is wrong with me. And we just sat and practiced really embracing the fact that nothing is wrong with you
Yes.
inherently, that we were designed differently for a reason. And it's supposed to help us expand ourselves,
Yeah.
integrate ourselves, become more whole. And I think that's the constant work. How do we find the bridge? And that's a lot of the work that I do with Theara, is helping people bridge to one another, regardless of their neurodifferences, whether they're neurodistinct or more neurotypical, wherever they're at on the map. And, my husband, like yours, has experienced PTSD as well. And it's difficult to ferret that out, but the bridge can be the same. It doesn't necessarily need to be designed specifically to each individual's needs. We're never going to understand exactly what another person's perspective is, but we can identify a bridge and a common place where we can meet and move forward together.
Okay, well, we're definitely going to we're going to kind of deep dive into bridging, right? Bridging two people and bridging the gap, if you will. Like, okay, what I want to also say, because it's important with what you just said, so often I get emails, and I don't know if you experience this too, from such well-intended partners of a neurodivergent person. And it's just microaggression, micro pathologizing, offensive language. And then sometimes I'll try and redirect, right? So it's just blaming partners this, they're so this and that, they're autistic. And then it's just an email that's downhill from there. And I'll gently do my best to try and give it my point of view around that. And then sometimes what comes back is even more offensive. It's just like unintentionally, right? So I want those folks that are listening that really believe that your partner is deficient, that the autism diagnosis is a problem. I really want you to listen, please, just with an open mind, be curious about what we're going to talk about with, okay, you might have a different brain than your partner does, but you can bridge. There can be a bridge, and we're going to talk about what that looks like.
Yeah. And to me, that's the big intrapersonal acronym that I focus on at Theara. And we talk about, the B stands for build for bounty. How are we going to move forward together? How can we put some bricks down in our relationship? How can we lay some foundational elements to help us move forward positively, regardless of our difference? And the R is relate with recognition. We have to understand that we bring different things to the table. And I think many of us kind of look in our love relationships to, there's the whole Jerry Maguire statement, he completes me, that whole concept. And we think the other person is going to do that, but we come in with our own understanding of, our upbringing, what a marriage might look like, what a relationship's supposed to be. And those things sometimes just need to fall away so that we can establish new things together to move forward. And the I is integrate for impact. How can we utilize your strengths and my strengths to positively benefit our relationship. And that's the G is gather for gain. And that just moves us forward into, how can we pick up little habits? Maybe it's a micro habit, maybe it's a strategy, maybe it's like last time we talked about, putting something physical on a wall so that you can like see this is what we're doing for each other. And it sounds so simple. And I've had so many people kind of laugh at me about that when I talk, like, what are you saying? I need a behavior chart with my spouse. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's important for us to have that check-in and kind of say, okay, it's a way to validate what you're doing and also what the other individual is doing. And when you see your partner validate you through something very visual, because we're all different types of learners, right? Some of us can take a statement or a word of kindness, a compliment, and it really sits with us. But for someone else, they need to see it, or there needs to be some kind of physical, act showing it, a display of tenderness or emotion. And then the E is educate to empower. So that's all about how we can educate each other to move forward. And that's exactly what we're doing now with listening to a podcast, following different people on social media to try to gather more information about who you are and then who your partner is so that you can more productively move forward.
So I just love your acronyms.
Seriously,
I love your acronyms. They are brilliant. And I want to talk about, really, like, it's like you're getting your foundation down with building for bounty, then relate with recognition. What I got is sometimes we have to change the way that we look at things so that we can see the other person's perspective. How can I, relate to what you're saying or find connection or even have empathy or compassion for your experience instead of getting so locked in to my viewpoint? And that's not just me as an autistic person. Chris can get locked into his viewpoint too sometimes.
Exactly. We all do. We're looking at the world through our own lens, right? It's almost like we're all creating our own little movie for ourselves of and so it's stepping outside and trying to look through somebody else's lens. And that's really hard. So for me, the acronyms were they give me a mental script to follow. That's pretty broad. And that way, like when I'm in a difficult encounter, okay, I need the bridge. Maybe I'm not recognizing the other person's differences. Maybe I'm not truly seeing them, and it's just that mental check to go back and grab hold of my thoughts so I don't go down the rabbit hole of this person. I can't believe how awful they are. I can't believe they just said that to me, that's not accepting any kind of abuse, but recognizing that most of the time when we are involved in any kind of abusive behavior, there's no intention associated with it. It doesn't mean it's not impactful in a negative way to the other person, but we have to stop, the way we're thinking. And so giving ourselves those scripts to move forward, I think is really powerful. Well, it has been for me. It's changed my relationships profoundly.
Well, 100%. Since our first call, it's like for Chris and I just noticing, and I'm going to jump down here to gather for gain, rooting each other on. You talked about how you put this little whiteboard in your bathroom so you and your partner could note the good that's happening, because it's easy to forget when we get in our day-to-day. And it's like, oh, he didn't take the trash out, right? Or, and you're just like, check on the negative. It's so easy to focus on the negative, sadly. And so how beautiful. So we don't have our whiteboard, but I'll tell you what, since our last podcast, I shared with Chris, about you and how amazing you are, and said, I want us to start doing this at the end of the day where we just do a review. And then what I've noticed is we're starting to do it throughout the day, just like, you rock, way to go, good job, just focusing on those positives so that we build up that emotional, bank account, the positive nugget bucket, if you will.
Yes. And that's what we so badly need to do. And, I've been doing it for a while, and it was interesting because the other day I looked at the board, it's higher than, and I had no idea, because I had not redone the board in a while. And my husband had literally filled all these hearts in, he was putting them in places that
That's
I couldn't,
adorable.
and I didn't even recognize he was seeing me like that. Like he was recognizing. And so it was
Oh,
like, oh, so like it made it so much easier when we do have like a negative
yes.
shuffle in the morning, getting kids out of the house or whatever it is, where I was like, he's seeing me. So, and then it
Yes.
makes me desire to go back and give more
Yeah.
positive input to him. But not only that, he noticed that I wasn't doing it. And it made him check in with me
Mhm.
more. And I
Wow.
think, I heard, it's so funny because I heard Brene Brown
Yes.
on a
Love Renee.
message, and she was talking about calibrating your energy
Mhm.
level and
Yep.
doing that check-in with your partner and saying, okay, I'm coming home right now, I'm at a 10%. I don't have a lot of extra to give. And it reminded me of my little boy, because we were at Disney and he was like,
Mm.
a mom, he was
Oh.
like, he was telling us we were with friends and we
Mhm.
were not, it was a bad, maybe parenting moment, but he was at he kept telling us, I'm at
Mhm.
30%, I'm at 20%. And he was only like 5 or 6, and he got down to zero. He's like 0. And he just laid down on the pavement. And the friend that was with us picked him up and carried
Mhm.
him back to the hotel with us, because he's like, he was telling us the whole time and we were just all caught
Mhm.
up, and I think,
Mhm.
all of those things that we can do, even if it's just a little thing to say, hey, I've had a rough day, because sometimes we just come home and we're reactive and we take that out on the people we love the most. And we're not
Mhm.
letting them know it's not really about you.
Yes.
And they're receiving it as it's about them. They're
Yes.
taking you in as though they've done something wrong. Especially for me, I tend to do that a lot with my family members.
Mhm.
And so having that, we started doing it before I even heard it from Brene Brown, because of my neurodivergent little one who was already calibrating.
Yes, which
Yeah,
is
which
so
was pretty
beautiful.
amazing.
Well, let's talk about that too, because meltdowns, the term meltdowns right now is controversial within the neurodiversity movement. But what I want to say is that term works for me. And I really feel like each autistic person, we really get to use the language that works for each of us. Last
Yes.
night, same thing happened. I'm driving home and I'm at 30%.
Mhm.
And we just got a little bit of a bigger camper. And so I had, I wasn't feeling well in the morning. I saw a few clients. I got home and we still had to put all the stuff from our other camper into the new camper. And it's like 8 o'clock at night. And I got home and I just said, I'm peopled out. I am peopled
Yeah.
out. And then finally, like after dinner, we started talking and I realized like, uh-oh, like I'm at 0% now. I'm on the verge to, have a meltdown. And so
Right.
I said, I'm going to actually go lay down. So kind of like your son, I didn't just lay down in the backyard, but I went into our bedroom. And what Chris does that's really beautiful is he just gets real neutral. Like his energy gets real neutral, because he said, I know I don't want to be in the line of fire. And I
Mhm.
know if I say anything, that there could be kind of this, and he's right. That is my personal experience. Like you said, we love our family members, and sometimes without intending to, there can be a huge impact when we do get upset and our battery's at 0. So that was just beautiful for us to be able to let me recalibrate and just
Mhm.
build up enough energy to go, get into the camper and do what we needed to do with moving stuff. But I want to say that it does take 2 people,
Yes.
and we've had a good week. If we had a bad week and struggled every single day, last night he probably also would have been like,
Right. Right. Because everybody gets to that point.
yes,
It's everyone gets to their
yes,
end space. It's not just the neurodistinct person that we may,
yes.
and that's something that, I was reading an article from Forbes, and it was on the sharp end of neuroinclusion. And it was talking about how when someone gets into a dysregulated state, it even used the term meltdowns, I believe. And it was
Mhm.
talking about when that happens in the workplace, that
Mm,
people don't understand. and they negatively meet that other person in that
Yes.
dysregulated state. And so understanding, and to me, I don't think of, it's interesting, I don't think of like executive functioning or sensory processing differences between the neurodistinct and more neurotypical people as necessarily a negative thing. We just have a much more dynamic approach to those concepts. So there may be an area where we're really great at executive functioning skills, but our disparity between those areas is more significant. So we are more likely to have more frequent issues with dysregulation. It just happens, and it's part of who we are. And when our partners understand that, if you're in a mixed, neurodivergent relationship, it's a huge brick to lay in the foundation of your relationship, because then they know it's not about them. You're not crazy. There's not something wrong with you. This is how you're wired, and you need more time, or maybe you need more frequent pauses in your interaction or engagement, and that's totally okay. It doesn't mean that there's something that the other person isn't doing right, or it's owning that, embracing that about yourself, and then saying, okay, what do I need to nest myself in this moment so that I don't negatively impact my relationship?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you've said so many things. So holy cow, where do I go? So let me just throw out there, what for those listening, especially partners that are not autistic, what I want you to hear is, we're not saying a meltdown is a license to be excused, to be like, it's not an excuse, like excusable in terms of, oh, it's a license to be mean.
Right.
We're not
Exactly.
saying that.
It is absolutely not that.
Yeah, we're not saying that. What we are saying is it's an explanation of what's going on with our system when we get on overload. And some partners might shut down, where they withdraw without saying anything. And some might be more outward, where it looks like my computer, my internal, my brain computer, my systems computer is just going, bah, it's literally melting down.
Right.
And so I want to say that too. I also want to say that can come from, and I don't know if this is your experience, maybe we've talked about this before, but we're not just sensitive to the environment around us, sights, sounds, smells, too many people, but also energy. We are picking up energy. So as a clinician, what I'm noticing, especially as I continue to kind of do my own healing work on my own, is that I am becoming really sensitive to energy. Now, I've always been sensitive to energy, but now as I'm getting more attuned to how sensitive, it's like that can wipe me out.
I 100% relate to you in that. And, the concept of energy contagion is very, very real. And so for somebody who is hyper aware, like, you and I are, then backing up and figuring out, I'm always thinking, okay, what do I need to do to nest myself in right now? Like, how can I do that? If I can't go to a room that I feel is sensory safe, if the energy contagion is too much, can I distance myself from, people physically? Can I have a fidget ring that I'm like, I love conquering rings, because I can just sit there
Oh my gosh,
and fidget while I'm talking to somebody, and it's really, discreet, and not that it needs to be. I'm not saying that we need to hide that. But for me, that works, because I don't want to take away necessarily from a conversation or social engagement. But what can I do? Can I move to a room that's even more physically, like visually appealing to me? Like if we're in a larger space, there's different things, and you need to figure out what works for you. But I always reach for that sensory bucket to get those needs met, because the energy contagion can be really toxic for individuals that do have those sensitivities.
Let's just define that energy contagion for folks that are listening that perhaps have never heard that, because that's an important term.
Yeah. For me, energy contagion is just when someone comes in that's bringing maybe it's anxiety energy, maybe it's
Mhm.
someone is very angry and they're bringing that into the room. Maybe it's pure exhaustion. For someone like me, I literally, it's like my satellite
Mhm.
dish is huge. So I'm absorbing all of that like a sponge. And I have
Mm.
learned to let it move through me. But that's a practice and a
It
discipline.
is.
It's not something that
Yep.
happens overnight. So that can initially, for someone that's not more aware, be a real trigger and cause really strong reactions from the other
Mhm.
individual. And so recognizing, okay, this is about what I'm experiencing and in the energy. Maybe that person has little control over the energy that they're
Mhm.
bringing into the room because they're at zero, because they just got bombarded with a bunch of negative things. And so what do I need to do to control myself? How can I get in my body? And that's where that
Mhm.
the sensory input, I think,
Oh,
or sensory satiating activities, it may be
yes.
removing yourself from some things,
Yes.
is huge. Like, my son had to get, I don't know if they're called, they're not ear rings, they're ear loops.
Yeah.
Be- because when we're at the dinner table, he just has a hard time hearing other people eat, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
then he can control the sound. So bringing that into larger group settings, I think, and those kind of safety nets for particularly people struggling with autism and other associated
Mhm.
neurodivergent issues is really powerful tool to move you forward.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we're going to stay on energy contagion for a minute because some things that I'll do is, and Chris, just because he's we just honor the indigenous. So we do Palo Santo or sage. So I will Palo Santo my
Mhm.
office, sage my office, clearing the energy. I have a rattle in my office sometimes just to move the energy. Going outside, like brushing it off. I do that,
Yes.
right? I'll just go into the bathroom and I will put cold water, just let it run on my hands until I can feel kind of it washing. Drumming, like there's so many things we can do. Like you said, it's definitely a practice.
Mhm.
Those of us that are working with people all day long, I know I used to not do it and I would just be exhausted. I thought I had mono, it was
Yes, no, that's what it feels like. It can come over like a huge wave. And for me, I carry a rock around, a little smooth
yes,
stone in my purse, and I will go to the bathroom and wash my hands and let the water run over it. Imagine that energy being going into the
yep,
stone, letting the
mhm,
water move it away. And so whatever, if it's a visualization practice,
yeah,
sometimes I imagine, myself standing in a globe with things swirling
yeah,
all around
oh
me
yeah,
and stepping back outside of it until I can see this is something that's not me. This is not something I have control or power to change in any kind of way. I need
love
to
it.
let that float away from me.
Yes, I love it. I did a meditation this morning and I could feel some heaviness. So I just kind of used my breath as well, like just that blowing like out, just letting it just dissipate. And this might sound woo-woo, but what I want to say to folks is in indigenous populations, this is the norm, and
Mhm.
so what I love also about the neurodistinct community is we do think outside the box and we're very open-minded. I'm not saying that indigenous traditions are outside the box by any means. Um, Oftentimes, though, again, anything that is considered different from the norm, as we've learned, right? Even
Mhm.
culturally, is considered, oh, it's woo woo. But in reality, for those of us that are helping, whether we're in an education position, we're teaching, we're coaching, we're counseling, we're healing, we have to use the tools that you and I are talking about. And it can be, I mean, for some people, it's just gardening or, getting outside and going on a hike, putting your feet into the grass, right?
Right. Yes, grounding us. I mean, it's really mindfulness to
It
take. I mean,
is.
I
It
know we
is.
talked, that's the more maybe palatable term for
Yes.
some people,
Yes.
but I agree. I mean, these are absolutely imperative things to employ in your life because and it's really about getting back into our bodies because our
Mhm.
bodies do. I mean, I love the book The Body Keeps
Keeps the
Score,
score.
and
Yeah.
they do keep score. I've worked with so
Hmm.
many people who have struggled with chronic illness. And many times the roots of it go back into trauma, microaggressions,
Oh my
all of it,
gosh.
being in a trauma bond, being, having been in a betrayal situation. So
Yeah.
there's all of those things. These are important tools that we have to basically focus our mind in a positive way. You have to think about the positive, because thinking constantly about the negative, and that's a battle. It's not going to feed you. It's not going to nourish your soul. And our society is kind of throwing negative things at us all the time.
All
So
day long. I mean, social media, it's all day long, and
yes.
it's very litigious. It's very negative. And so getting back to this energy contagion, I've got to take a drink. Talking so much. For those listening, in relationship, whether you're in relationship with partner, children, coworkers, colleagues, be aware of the energy contagion. Be aware that you might wake up and you're not feeling great. Well, other people can feel that, and that might kind of, set the tone. Be aware that you might be picking up other people's energy. Negative emotion, emotion is energy in motion that's not yours. And what we're talking about is, how can you really self-care so that relationally it's not creating more issues? There's enough issues. My gosh.
Yes. And setting positive boundaries for yourself, I think, is very much a part of the conversation,
Yes.
particularly like in our relationships and love relationships, because you're usually integrating families. You're going to be, there are going to be the occasions where you're at a big family gathering, and that energy can come from someone the other individual really, really loves and wants you to be around and be a part of. So that's been helpful in my relationship with my husband, is saying, like, look, I have a hard time with this person because of the energy contagion situation. That person's maybe chronically, they're, negative, and it's difficult for me. And so we have kind of this understood thing that if I'm in the corner, because sometimes those people will corner you or put, that we watch each other in those gatherings and kind of go in and do a little swoop and say, hey, hon, come over here, And so being aware of those things are really huge, and being sensitive to one another in that space, I think, is really powerful.
I do too. Well, this has been amazing.
I love talking to you, Candice. We could, I think, talk for hours and hours.
Really?
But we can't keep everybody on the podcast that long. Yeah.
But I love how we were able to really deep dive into Bridge, your acronym for couples. And then also, I love that you were able to talk at length about energy contagion, because again, we have a lot of couples that listen to our podcast that there's so much frustration. So it's like, Renee, you're a huge resource, for both people in this coupleship to feel empowered to go, instead of pointing the finger, can I do a U-turn? How can we work together so that we're happier?
Yes. That's what I think so many people, and a lot of times we don't give people the tools. My goal with Theara was really, because I come in as a cognitive coach, not officially as a therapist.
Yeah.
And so I'm coaching people on how to find those bridges, giving people some tools and strategies that they can utilize day one, even if it's just one tool that they take away from it. And I'm sharing those out as much as I can on social media, because those things aren't necessarily, they're not provided to us. We have to learn those things.
Yeah.
And I've learned many of them through really, really difficult, challenging times in my own relationships. And so how do we move forward and not let the relationship destroy us? Sometimes relationships can, if we're unaware, and we take ourselves away, even if the relationship ends, and you're going to bring yourself into something new. And so in that case, having those strategies is, I think, essential to us.
Oh, yeah. It's
feeling good, being okay, being well.
Yeah, it's a life vest.
Yes.
For so many of us, literally a life vest.
And that's what I'm trying to do. Throw you the
You're
life
doing it.
preserver. Yes, in the
Doing
storm.
it. You're doing it. So Renee, tell the world how people can reach you.
So the best way to reach me is via Theara.com, or you can email me at Theara@Theara.com, which is THEARA. And I'm on social media as
Yes.
Theara Way, because our tagline is lighting the way.
Which is so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on again. This was
Yes,
so
this was
fun.
wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you have an incredible summer, everyone out there that's listening. Yeah, we're
Right?
right in the middle of it. And so we get to keep enjoying the warmer weather. Some of us live in places where it's warm all the time, but I don't. And I had a really hard winter. So I'm excited about the
Where do you
summer.
live? Where do you live?
We're in Flagstaff, and we got I think it was the second snowiest winter on record in the city. So it was just like 1.5 feet every week. So I am so happy to be outside.
Oh my gosh, me too. So we're in Utah and in the valley, and we got more snow for like 9 months. I mean, it was the longest winter for all of us. So I'm with you. I am just soaking up the sun. It feels like it's getting shorter, like the warmer weather, which makes me a little nervous because I just
I hear you. I know. I feel the same. It's the same up here. We haven't broken 90, and we usually do by now. So
well, yeah, because you're in Arizona. So that's wild. So yes, wishing you a beautiful summer and everyone out there. And what's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking, gosh, will our podcast be out there in the ethers like 30 years from now, and people will listen?
Right?
You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, they were talking about summer anyway. I just think it's so fascinating. Just, well, one day we'll be the ancestors for someone.
Yes.
Who's lighting the way.
And that's the most powerful thing. That's what drives me forward every day. Knowing that my life can have multi-generational impact, and doing everything I can to make that as positive as it can possibly be.
Beautiful way to end it. Thank you so much. I'm right there with you. All right, listeners, thank you so much for coming on, watching us today since we've been recording, and just wishing everyone so much love, so much compassion, just asking all of us to be tender with our sweet selves as we go out into the world. It's not easy. So let's start by being tender with ourselves and love each other and love ourselves more. And until next time, bye.